Decisions. Sometimes in life, we are faced with hard decisions, good decisions, because we're choosing between two things of awesomeness.
Awesome!
So what we were talking about today is a Roth IRA, which is awesome, and a Roth 401k, which is also awesome. But how do you know which one to pick? Well, we're going to find out what the answer is to that and a whole lot more on the latest Good Financial Sense podcast. This is episode 162. What's going on, GFC fam and Wealth Hacker Nation? It's your boy Jeff, and it is time to make your life more. And I love these types of episodes because today I get to answer one of your questions. That is correct. I'm answering another subscriber, listener, reader question. It's weird. When you have a blog, a podcast, and a YouTube channel, like, are you a subscriber? Are you a reader? You tell me. But that's what we're going to do. If you have an interest in submitting a question, I just keep making it easier for you to submit a question. You can go to goodfinancialsense.com/ask. That's one way. Or you can go to and this page has already been on the site. It is goodfinancialsense.com/podcast. And there you'll see me looking at my computer screen with a smile, and you'll see all the different ways that you can subscribe. But if you scroll down, you also find a new contact form here. And here you can see, you'll see the contact form to submit that question. And also you'll see some of the recently answered questions that I've answered here on the Good Financial Sense podcast. So once again, I'm going to share this link one more time, goodfinancialsense.com/podcast. And there you will find the contact form to submit your question that I will answer, or I should say may answer on a future episode.
Stay tuned.
Let's go ahead and get into today's question. So today's question comes from Carlos. Carlos has this to say: Hey Jeff, I just started a new job after a lengthy stretch of being unemployed. Awesome. I'm glad that you've found a job. I know that can be a very stressful time. My last job had a 401k, but I was excited when I found out my new job offers a Roth 401k. Awesome. Awesome. Everything's awesome. I already have a Roth IRA thanks to you. Yes, but I'm not sure which one to do. I wish I could do both, but financially I can't afford it. If I had to pick one, which one would it be? A Roth IRA or the Roth 401k? Carlos, once again, man, dude, thank you for being a supporter here of the Good Financial Sense channel, podcast, blog, however you discovered. Either way, you submitted your question. Also, congratulations on getting the new job. Like I just said, I know that can be a stressful time, and also awesome that you already have a Roth IRA. I cannot say how, I don't want to say awesome again, but how well you have set yourself up. I don't know how much you have in it, but just the simple fact that you have one, you are investing into it. Like you've already set yourself apart from so many that have not taken advantage of investing, especially taking advantage of an amazing investment tool like the Roth IRA. Now, I want to get to your question because you have a Roth. Now you have a 401k that has the Roth provision. So maybe you don't know this, but if you have access to a 401k, your employer has the capability of adding a Roth provision, adding the ability to have a Roth 401k. They have that ability, but it would require them to go back to whoever's taking care of the 401k, like whoever set it up in the first place, and then adding the Roth provision to it. Maybe something, if you have a 401k, they don't have the Roth provision yet, that might be something that they'll eventually do. It might be something to continue to pester, annoy your HR department and be like, hey, okay, I know you all could have a Roth 401k, and I really like the Roth, so when are you going to make this happen?
You tell me.
And I would continue just to pester them unless that could interfere with you maybe getting a promotion, maybe a new job, a raise. So, I would tread lightly, but continue just to be curious and ask. Now, for those that are interested in reading more about this, we do have a blog post to support this, which we'll have a link to in the description of the podcast or in the YouTube video, wherever you are consuming this piece of content. So the title of this article is Roth IRA versus Roth 401k. Choose the best plan for you. Let's first just talk about some of the similarities of the Roth IRA versus the Roth 401k. So both offer tax-free distributions. That's why when we hear Roth, we immediately think tax-free.
Tax-free.
And you should. Roth equals tax-free. You're not paying any taxes whenever you are taking distributions, when you are taking money out. That is the Roth 401k, as also the Roth IRA. So both offer tax-free distributions. Neither offers tax-deductible contributions. So what that means, and this is a big deal, most people understand this with the Roth IRA. With the Roth, you don't get any, can't deduct that from your taxes. So whatever income that you make, whatever Roth you put into it, it's after tax. You're not getting any sort of deduction expense that you can take off. Same thing with the Roth 401k. Most people, when they think of the 401k, it's coming out of your paycheck. It is pre-tax if it's not the Roth. If it's the Roth, similar. It's not reducing your income. So some people kind of count on that to reduce their tax liability. But with a Roth 401k, like the Roth IRA, you're not going to get that. So that's another thing that you need to know. Now, another key feature that both of these have is the ability to pull out your contributions at any time tax-free. And this is one of the big deals why I love the Roth IRA and why I always kind of looked at the Roth IRA as a savings account on steroids, because you could put your money in, you get the tax deferral, you get tax-free distributions later on, but also if you ever need the money, you can pull it out at any time. So that's the Roth IRA. Roth 401k is similar, but they do have what they call pro rata distribution rules and how that could look. So I'll give you a quick little example here. So if you have a Roth 401k with $20,000 invested, and that is $14,000 of your own money that you put in, and $6,000 of that is in invested earnings, then 30%, which is $6,000, the gain divided by the total of any early distribution that you take will be considered as investment income. So that is different. So you can take the money out, but once again, if you're taking $6,000 out with the Roth, like how that works in the IRA is that there is no pro rata distribution. So what that would look like is, okay, if I had $14,000 that I put in of my own money and it had grown to be $20,000, then I have access to the contributions at any time. It's just that $6,000 gain that I would have to leave in there until retirement. So you can actually kind of separate them out. Say, all right, I'm just going to take my money out that I put in. All the earnings I'm going to leave until later on because I don't want to pay any tax or penalty on that. But with the Roth 401k, they're going to look at this whole percentage of all right, how much are you taking out, and of how much you're taking out, what percentage of the total value and how much gain you have. So there is some taxes that you can pay. Either way though, you do get access to it, which is a big deal. Now, something else that is also important to note, and that's why we have this really big blue box on the blog post. And I'll go ahead and read this verbatim. Important note, not all 401k plans permit early withdrawal of Roth contributions for all the same reasons. They don't permit early withdrawals from 401k plans in general. Many only allow for early withdrawals as either loans or hardship withdrawals. The rules we discussed above as our IRS rules, not employer rules. So that is just something else that you need to know. Just because you can doesn't mean that you are allowed. Every employer is different. Every plan is different. So before you feel confident that you can pull this money out, double check with HR, find out what the rules are, find out if this is something that you can do. Cool. Now, some other similarities. Both offer tax-deferred investment returns. That just basically means it's sitting in there, not paying any taxes as it's growing. That is true of also traditional 401ks or traditional IRAs. Accumulated investment earnings are taxable if withdrawn early. We just talked about that. Here's one that may be of issue of you if you are closer to Social Security. Distributions from either won't affect the taxability of your Social Security benefits. That is a big deal. Like if you're pulling money out, you don't want to affect if you have to pay taxes on your Social Security. Something I'm not overly concerned with right now where I'm at. And if you were in a similar situation, if you're years away from retirement, you probably do not care about this at all.
Oh, is that true?
There's some of the similarities. Now let's talk about some of the key differences between a Roth IRA and the Roth 401k. First up is contributions amount. In 2022, right now, the most you can put in a Roth IRA is $6,000. Unless you are over the age of 50, then you can go up to $7,000 with a catch-up limit. 401k is different. Obviously, you have your 401k limit. So right now, in 2022, the Roth 401k is $20,500 per year, or $27,000 if you are over the age of 50. Like that's huge, right? This is all after tax, but it's all growing tax deferred, all potentially tax free. To put away $27,000 a year to have potentially tax free growth, like that's awesome. Now here is not so much a difference, but with the Roth 401k, we're talking here is employer matching contributions. So if you have a 401k plan, obviously with a Roth IRA, that's your own retirement account. Roth IRA stands for individual retirement account. So your employer is not going to add any money to your Roth IRA unless they're just really nice, but that is not part of your benefits package. Okay, I think that makes sense, right? So with the Roth 401k, many people don't realize this. So if you have the Roth 401k inside your 401k plan at work, you actually have two different accounts. Like you have your traditional 401k and then you have your Roth 401k. They can't commingle those two together. It's the same reason why if you had a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, they would not be in the same account. They would be separated, and they have to be because of reporting purposes, because you got pre-tax money, after-tax money. Okay, so we get that. So if your employer has some sort of matching component, so that basically, if you're putting in so much and your employer matches you, say dollar for dollar up to 7% or 50% of your match up to a certain percentage, like whatever that is, like every employer has a different matching if they even offer a match. How that would work. So even if you were to elect to say, you know what, I want 100% of my 401k going into the Roth 401k. I don't want the traditional 401k. I want a Roth 401k. You can choose that, yes. But if the employer has a match, the match, since it is a deduction for your employer, it has to go into the pre-tax bucket, which basically means that it has to go in the traditional 401k. So that means if you were to allocate 100% of your 401k contribution into the Roth portion, you would still have to have a regular 401k that the employer match would go into. Hope I explained that where it makes sense. So that just basically means your employer is matching your contribution. Your part is going to go into the Roth. Their part has to go into the traditional 401k. All right, just so a quick note here on loans. You cannot take a loan on a Roth IRA. You don't have to take a loan because you can take the money out. Now I get it, in that case, maybe you want to take a loan so that if you want to repay it, it doesn't affect your contributions. As far as with the Roth 401k, not all employers are going to offer loan provisions, but if they do, the IRS does permit you to borrow up to 50% of your invested balance, a maximum up to $50,000. So another good rule to know. Now let's quickly talk about required minimum distributions. And if you are younger than me, then you could care less about this. Maybe you care, but essentially for those that don't know, with any sort of retirement plan, like the IRS is going to say, okay, you've been growing this money tax deferred for a number of years. You've not paid any taxes on that. We want to start collecting money on this. So they put in what they call these RMDs, required minimum distributions, which basically says that, all right, we're going to start forcing you to take money out so that we can start collecting our tax. But here, we're not talking about a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA. We're talking about Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks. So here's how this works. So the IRS required minimum distribution rules require that you begin taking mandatory distributions from your tax shelter retirement plan beginning at the age of 72. However, if the Secure Act 2.0 were to pass, both in Congress and become law, the age would be required to be at age 75, which is interesting. I will say this is a change. It used to be at age 70 when they would start. They amended those rules and looks like they may amend them again. Now, with the Roth IRA, RMDs are not required. So basically, you could have a Roth IRA and never take any money out, which makes sense because the IRS doesn't really care if you take money out because they're not going to collect any tax. Now, this doesn't really, I guess we'll go ahead and mention it really quick. If you were to pass away and your kids or whomever inherits your Roth IRA, then the beneficiary Roth IRA, there would be a requirement that they're going to force that person to start cashing in a certain amount. And they don't collect any taxes on it, so there is no benefit other than they're getting it out of the retirement account and making that new person start to invest or do something with that, maybe give it to the economy, all that good stuff. But that is more for the inherited Roth IRA. Just good piece of information to know.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to go back to what sparked this episode was a question from Carlos, who he talked about had a new job, already has a Roth IRA. He now has access to the Roth 401k, and he wants to know which one to pick. And I don't have all of his information to truly answer that question, but the one other key difference that I want to point out with the Roth IRA versus the Roth 401k, and I think this is a big one. No, this is a big one, is that in the Roth IRA, you are in charge of your investment selection. So in Carlos's case, I don't know what he has in his Roth IRA, but whether it was a recommendation to him, he had the power to choose, do I want that or do I want to buy something else? So do you want to buy ETFs? Do you want to buy mutual funds? Do you want to buy individual stocks? These are all choices that you can make for the investment choices inside your Roth IRA. Like, you have the power of control. You have the power of choice. That is a big deal. Inside a Roth 401k, your investment choices are subject to what investments does your 401k offer. And if they already have the traditional 401k, typically whatever you have on the traditional side, you're also going to have on the Roth side. But in those cases, you typically, I've never seen this. I won't say it can never happen, but for the most part, I've never seen a situation where a person had a Roth 401k and they could choose their own investment. So if they wanted to buy like Tesla stock, Facebook stock, if they wanted to buy the gold ETF, GLD, unless it was on there, then they couldn't choose that. So that really gives the control. That definitely has us leaning towards the Roth IRA as one of the why we want to choose that one first. But going back to the contribution limits, Carlos, assuming he's under the age of 50, $6,000 is the most that he can put into the Roth, whereas $20,500 he can put inside the Roth 401k. So that's huge, right? Like, that's a huge dollar amount. We're talking, more than 3x. But he did mention that right now, financially, he can't do both. He wishes he could do both financially, but right now he just can't afford it. Makes sense. He was unemployed for a long stretch. He finally has a job. I'm glad that he's willing to save now versus like waiting. So financially, he can't afford both. I would, in most situations, I'm not a big fan of getting the free money for the sake of, like, I'd actually would rather do the Roth IRA first, but I like this idea of, man, if they have a lucrative or an enticing matching offer, okay, get some of that free money. Other than that, I would go back to the Roth IRA and I would focus on maxing that out. I want him to get to the point where he's maxing out $6,000 for him. If he is married and has a spouse, I would like for him to have her max out her Roth IRA, and she doesn't even have to work. As long as he's making enough to cover both, he can max out hers or his, he can max out hers. So now we're talking $12,000 into a Roth IRA for them both. Now they can't combine accounts. Husband and wife can't have a joint Roth IRA. So he would have to have his, she would have to have hers. But in both of those, you have control, you have the power of choice to choose the investments. And after that, then that's when I would lean towards the Roth 401k and putting in as much as you can and then making best use whatever investment choices that you have. So Carlos, if you had to pick one, which one would it be, the Roth IRA or the 401k? Well, in your case and for many people's case, I would say Roth IRA. I love the Roth. I love the power of control. I love the fact that I can choose. That's why I own individual stocks in my Roth right now. That's why if I wanted to, I could move custodians and potentially have crypto, Bitcoin inside my Roth. With Fidelity, there is Fidelity right now. They have this report. We're talking about maybe adding Bitcoin, but that is few and far between. Power of choice, power of control. That's what you get inside the Roth IRA. All right, y'all. Once again, if you have a question, you can go to goodfinancialsense.com/ask or /podcast, and you can submit your question to be featured hopefully on a future episode. As always, this is Jeff Rose reminding you that it's your money, it's your life, and only you can make it awesome. Until next time, peace.